Let's go to Jess, or maybe it's Jesse here in New Jersey. Jess, or Jesse, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay, are you able to hear me? As I was having problems with the
Crystal clear, man. Crystal clear.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. I've had a brain injury 35 years ago in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very mild one. A lot of people that I talk to just assume that since you can hold a coherent conversation and just do things okay, that you're fine, which is clearly not the case, because I have a lot of problems prioritizing and multitasking, even multitasking with doing like 2 or 3 things at a time. They get me very overwhelmed. And I was a diehard Christian like 20 years ago. And then all of a sudden common sense hit me, and it really didn't take long at all for me to get out. I didn't have any problems at all. It was sort of like when I hear you, Matt, talk about how you really didn't have that much trouble at all getting out of it. That's sort of how I was, because I would always say to me that either you believe it or you don't. And I'm always like, well, I guess I don't then, because, I mean, come on, talking snakes, it's kind of like, you don't really believe that. I mean, I can see the other stuff, but there's stuff in there that's just like, you're not serious about that, right? I don't know. But anyway, back to the religion. I know that there's this one girl in a support group who claims that when she died, she went up and saw Jesus. And
she didn't die.
Yeah, I know. But
that's always the first thing I correct when people talk about near-death experiences. Okay, near-death is not death.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But, I mean, she claims that she saw her grandfather and stuff, and he said that it wasn't her time, and then all this other bullshit. And I'm like, I don't know. The next time I see her there at that group, I don't know whether to call her out on it or what, because it's like, I don't know. I'm just like...
Is it relevant to the group? I mean, if somebody's told me something and I'm at a group event with them, it would never occur to me to call me out on what they told me in that group environment unless it was somehow relevant to the group.
Well, in a lot of ways, it is. I don't know. I mean, the rest of the group is like, they're just like, oh my God, really? And it's just...
Well, what would you hope to get? What would you hope to achieve by calling her out on it?
Good question. I don't know. Maybe I'll just leave the room, because it's like it just bugs me.
I understand.
I don't know, but
at the end of the day, you have a woman who had an experience, and she has some explanation for it and beliefs about it. There's no way to prove her wrong. So you're unlikely to change your mind because this is a direct experience she had. Now, you might be able to talk to her and explain other things about near-death experiences and how a brain starved of oxygen and in a state dying is not really the best barometer of accurate information, and how in near-death situations, what we think is most likely happening is once you are resuscitated and conscious again, your brain then has to make up some story about what happened in the missing time, and so it goes to whatever makes the most sense. And so if there's religious imagery that perhaps works, you can explain all this to her, and you may never change your mind. And that's why I was asking, what do you hope to get out of it? Because if the goal is just to make her look silly in front of other people in the group, I think that's a bad idea. If there are other people in the group who are starting to buy into her story because they find it compelling, having conversations with other people about other explanations for near-death experiences might be more beneficial. But unless there's some real good reason to call her out, I don't know that I would or could.
Okay, yeah, that's very good advice. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is you had mentioned that people don't always believe that you had a brain injury.
Right.
So what?
Yeah.
Ignore them. And unless they're medical experts, and medical experts aren't going to give you their opinions about your injury or anything else. You know what your life's like. But in a way, you are very similar to her because you've had an experience that you can't prove to anybody else, that they can't disprove. And so maybe the conversation about it isn't worth it. And maybe the people that are frustrating you by saying they don't believe you have a brain injury, maybe that would be essentially the same as you frustrating her by pointing out that you don't believe that she's been to heaven.
Mm.
Well, it's pretty much I've gotten to the point after 35 years that I really, it doesn't come up that much.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is that it's just an underlying frustration.
Mm.
It really is what I'm saying. It's just sort of an underlying frustration, and because the name of the show is Truth Wanted, I figured I'd bring.
Well, here's what I would suggest.
It's
if you really want to have these conversations, I would suggest, hey, maybe try some street epistemology stuff. And as far as the specific,
I've got.
Yeah,
I go to support groups.
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple of support groups, and so that's pretty much where it comes out. And I go to a therapist about it, so it's not really on my mind all that much. But I mean, again, the name of the show is Truth Wanted, so I figured I'd bring it up.
Yeah, but one of the key things in street epistemology, and not to stomp all over Dan, but you need to ask her if she wants to have the conversation.
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
if she doesn't want to have the conversation, then no matter what your intentions are or what you think you're getting out of it, you're just being a dick by forcing somebody into a conversation they want to have.
Okay.
For sure. And, I would frame it like this. Like, I wouldn't do this in the group. I would have a one-on-one conversation. And I would say, like, hey, can you tell me more about this experience? Because, like, I just, I kind of have maybe some doubts of myself about these kinds of things in general, and like I was hoping maybe you could tell me a little bit more and just like make it something because like you're actually interested in the person and you want to hear about them and not necessarily because I think you're wrong and let me like tell you a way that you're wrong in a way that doesn't make me look like a bad person or something. Like do it because you're genuinely interested in these kinds of topics and stuff, and maybe share your experiences with her too and be like, oh hey, I had something similar and I never felt this, so that's kind of interesting, and maybe compare and contrast. I mean, there are a couple different ways you can start this conversation, but I think Matt's right. It just kind of depends on your intentions, what you really want to get out of it.
Good point. Very good point. Wow.
Thanks a lot for the call, Jesse. I hope it works out. And
Good point.
I don't know when I'll be back on Truth Wanted, but I'm sure Dan will fill me in if you come back with
That's
feedback.
right. Yeah, send me an email. Let me know how that goes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you both. Really, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
For sure. We'll see you next time. Yeah, that's a ethical discussion that we don't always have, where it's like, when do we need to talk to people about this stuff, and when are we just being dicks about it?
It reminds me of the people who are like, who want to claim that what I do on the Atheist Experiences is just exactly like the evangelists who are going door to door knocking, and I'm like, no, it's the exact opposite. People call me, which is them not only consenting and affirming that they want to have this conversation. I don't make outgoing calls on the show, and I've never gone door to door saying, have you stopped believing in Jesus yet? I can help.
Yeah, and for sure. And whether or not you agree with how street epistemology, at least the people who go out on the streets having conversations, I will say this, there's always consent involved, always get that on camera. And the people who walk away from those conversations, most of the time you see them smiling. Like you see them that they had like a genuinely good time. It's very rarely that I see where people walk away from this will be like, oh, this was a waste of my time, or like I didn't enjoy this at all. I think most people who have these conversations really like it. So yeah, I'd say look into it. There's definitely more than one way to approach those kinds of things.
Which, by the way, Magna Bosco and I have had a number of conversations both on the Atheist Experience and outside in the Atheist Debate stuff. And so my concerns about street epistemology are well on record, and the fact that I'm very supportive of it as one of many approaches to things. But when I'm done with a conversation with someone who has a dramatically different view from what I have on, especially the supernatural type stuff, this is going to sound bad. If they walk away smiling and are happy that they had a conversation, I'm a little irked. Not much. I don't want to make people miserable, but my goal is to make people think and to make them uncomfortable with their position, if in fact discomfort with the position is warranted. One of us, if we disagree and we actually care about truth, one of us should leave the conversation going, huh, that really, gave me a lot to think about, rather than, oh, I enjoyed a conversation. It's not a knock on it. It's just more about what I'm wanting.
I think when I say when people walk away smiling, is usually before that, there's a look of consternation on their face that goes on for 10 minutes. And then they say, oh, that's all. You weren't trying to sell me anything.
Yes.
You weren't trying to do anything like that. And that's when the smile comes like, oh, this was cool. This was different from my...
That is the perfect blend for me.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that's where most of it comes from. I genuinely do think people walk away. I mean, I had that experience myself, so I can attest for me. I can't say for everybody else, but I think there is a value to having those conversations, whether or not you're doing it on the street or you're just having it with friends or something. I don't think we should shy away from having them, but there is a proper context.
Yeah.
And you got to keep that in mind. You can't just go willy-nilly. I always tell people, don't talk about the afterlife at your grandmother's funeral. It's just stuff like that. It's like sometimes you just got to let it be. But
although there are occasions where I can imagine myself at a funeral where I would say things. When Pat Tillman's brother spoke at his funeral service and basically gave that, that rabid speech about, no, my brother was an atheist.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you dare come here and suggest that he's off in a better place. He's fucking dead.
Yeah, yeah.
And I get that. And I've been to a lot of funeral services where it is far more about the religion than the person who's in the box. And if it's not somebody that I'm close with or I'm just attending, then it just annoys the crap out of me. But if it's somebody that I care about and they decide, now, like if one of my parents die, if the whole funeral is about Jesus, I know that's what they probably wanted anyway. And so I'm not going to object on that front.
Right.
But if one of my atheist friends were to die and their family tried to turn it into a religious service and I was welcome to attend, they better not ask me to speak. They better not ask me to eulogize my friend, because I don't think I would hold back a bit.
I think that's a good caveat, that maybe there are situations at the funeral where you have to have those things.
Yeah.
When there's something that's really bothersome about, those kinds of situations, specifically speaking on the dead and stuff like that.
Yeah, let's sort this out right now for me. I don't care what the hell you do with my body. You can cut it up into pieces. You can donate any part that somebody else might find useful to somebody else. You can burn the rest. I don't care if you have any kind of service at all. I'm going to be dead. So even if you wanted to have an incredibly religious service, you certainly aren't going to bother me. But don't you dare try to spin my life as if there was some kind of deathbed conversion or how Matt was so if you turn it into a religious thing, I want my atheist friends to go, hell no, that ain't right.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, Matt. Matt said we could cut his body up.
That's
right.
right.
I think, audience, we're going to do that right after the show.
I'm pretty sure I said after I'm dead. I don't think...
We'll have to play the clip back. I'm not sure.
Well, that doesn't prohibit you from shooting me and then saying, oh, he's dead now. Let's cut him up.
That's true.